From filmmaker Sean S. Cunningham comes the 1980 film that gave birth to a behemoth of a franchise, painting the 80s with a brush dipped in terror, a splash of the supernatural, and an iconic figure who would later become synonymous with the fear that grips us in our darkest nightmares. I'm talking about the 1980 seminal slasher film, Friday the 13th. Now, let me preface this by saying that I truly, genuinely appreciate this film for what it is, and I admire the foundations it laid down for the slasher genre. This film was the beginning, the root system from which a sprawling horror franchise would grow, branching out into a staggering 11 additional films. But before we get lost in the vastness of the Friday the 13th franchise as a whole, let us focus on the trunk, the origin, the first film in this iconic saga. Directed by Sean S. Cunningham, this movie came at a time when the slasher genre was still finding its footing, grappling with formulas that work, and experimenting with what could make audiences' skin crawl. The premise is simple but effective. A group of young and unsuspecting counselors gathering to reopen an ill-fated summer camp, blissfully unaware of the doom that awaits them as they become targets of an unseen assailant, hell-bent on vengeance. It leverages the universal fear of being pursued, of being caught unaware, and the setting, the isolated, eerie woods of Camp Crystal Lake, amplifies this dread to a fever pitch.
Ta-da!
Are you crazy?
Want to see my trick shot? It's even better.
I don't believe you!
In the foundational stages of Friday the 13th, casting directors Julie Hughes and Barry Moss were engaged to assemble a group of young and likable actors, not necessarily highly experienced, to play the roles of camp counselors. This endeavor led to the selection of actors including Kevin Bacon, Laurie Bartram, and Peter Brower, who all had backgrounds in soap operas. While initially seeking a high-profile actress to portray Alice Hardy, the production ultimately turned to Adriana King, citing her natural demeanor in the audition. Robbie Morgan was unexpectedly cast as Annie, landing the role during a visit to the Hughes and Moss offices. A distinctive character was created with the addition of Walt Gorney, playing Crazy Ralph, aimed at both foreshadowing the tragic events and presenting a potential suspect.
I'm the messenger of God. You're doomed if you stay here. This place is cursed. Cursed.
The script cultivated a profound backstory for the antagonist, Pamela Voorhees, portrayed by Betsy Palmer, who navigated the character's descent into psychosis, driven by the tragic loss of her son due to the perceived immoral acts by the camp counselors.
Steve should never have opened this place again. There's been too much trouble here. Did you know that a young boy drowned the year before those two others were killed? The counselors weren't paying any attention. They were making love while that young boy drowned.
Production unfolded around Hardwick, Blairstown, and Hope Townships in Warren County, New Jersey, with the pivotal camp scenes being shot at Camp Nobibosco, a functioning Boy Scout camp. The filming employed frequent point-of-view shots to provide the audience with the villain's perspective, enhancing the psychological thriller element. Special effects maestro Tom Savini, recognized for his work on Dawn of the Dead, crafted seminal horror moments including the intense face axe wound and the climactic decapitation scene. Harry Manfredini, formulated a score that would capture the audience's suspense, whether the killer was actually on screen or not, creating an almost never-ending sense of dread. Drawing inspiration from Jaws, a unique sound motif was developed to signify the unseen menace. The iconic sound, construed from the words kill and mommy, became a defining feature of the film, echoing the psychotic drive of the killer and enhancing the dread as it reverberated in the moments of heightened tension, crafting an atmosphere that has cemented its place in the horror genre's history. Now, while I commend the setting, the grim atmosphere, and the phenomenal makeup effects crafted brilliantly by Tom Savini, I must say, it is in the following sequels where the franchise really finds its true identity, morphing and refining the raw, frenetic energy found in the original film. You see, Friday the 13th was almost like an experiment, a prototype of what was to come, teetering on the edges of great cinematic horror, but not quite there yet. It certainly does not shy away from blood and gore, offering shocking, unapologetic violence that shakes the viewer to their core, but it doesn't yet have the signature stamp of the hockey-masked killer, Jason Voorhees, who would only truly step into the limelight in the subsequent entries, bringing with him an even more terrifying and macabre vision. The first movie takes its time to build tension, leaning heavily on a mystery whodunit kind of vibe, which works to some extent, masterfully executing its suspense through a first-person's perspective of the killer, creating a close and personal confrontation with terror itself. However, when we compare this with the later entries, it arguably lacks the over-the-top, theatrical, almost caricatured violence that somehow becomes a disturbing yet captivating trademark of the series. In the original Friday the 13th, we were granted a glimpse into the abyss of human depravity, but it is in the sequels where we fully plunge into this abyss with narratives that are not afraid to traverse the realms of the absurd, the surreal, and even the supernatural. We get more fleshed out lore surrounding Jason, the vengeful killer with an unquenchable thirst for blood, an entity that goes beyond a mere mortal, becoming a symbolic representation of fear itself.
You let him drown. You never paid any attention. Look what you did to him. Look what you did to him.
But with that said, however, regarding the rest of the franchise, one cannot ignore the powerhouse performance by Betsy Palmer in the first film, who played Pamela Voorhees, portraying a twisted yet tragically driven character with a depth that is honestly quite astonishing for a horror film of this era. She brought to life a character that could have easily been a one-dimensional antagonist, but instead offered a glimpse into a mind corroded by loss and vengeance. But even then, it is hard not to feel that the real meat of the Friday the 13th franchise, the bizarre yet captivating escalation into the lore of Jason Voorhees, truly kicks off in the sequels, spinning a web of terrifying tales that takes us through the haunted woods of Crystal Lake, right into the heart of New York City, and even to the far reaches of space in the eccentric yet wildly entertaining Jason X. As much as I respect the original Friday the 13th for its craftsmanship in building suspense and setting a trend that would revolutionize horror cinema, I can't help but feel that it serves more as a prelude, an appetizer before the rich, varied, and often crazy banquet that the series would later serve its audience. It's akin to a pilot episode that sets the stage, introducing us to a world fraught with danger and fear, yet it's in the sprawling narrative of its offspring where we find the series stretching its limbs, daring to be bolder, scarier, and yes, even a bit crazier. So here's to Friday the 13th, the vanguard of genre-defining series, a film that holds a special place in my heart, yet stands as a humble beginning, a mere prologue to a grand tale of horror that spans decades, offering a rich tapestry of fear, suspense, and sheer brutal force that would be further honed to perfection in its sequels. It is the genesis, a cornerstone that holds the weight of a franchise that would dive deeper, reaching new heights and new lows, expanding on a narrative that, for me, finds its true home and grandeur in the wild, sometimes absurd, yet captivating adventures that would follow. With that said, Sean S. Cunningham's Friday the 13th is revoltingly rewatchable.